Welcome back to Askewed Reviews. And during the month of October, I'm doing what I'm calling Spooky Season Suggestions, which are all of the horror movies that my viewers have requested that I just haven't gotten to yet. So today's film is a viewer request for the 1974 movie Phantom of the Paradise. Here is your trivia question for today. Along with Winslow, who does Death Records also have files on? The answers will be at the end of this episode. So, in Phantom of the Paradise, we meet our main character of Winslow Leach. So, he happens to be an amazing composer when it comes to his music. However, though, he's apparently not considered a very good singer. That is at least in the opinion of Swan, one of the most famous record producers to ever exist. Swan does manage to get his hands on Winslow's music, but he tries to cut Winslow out completely. When Winslow tries to confront Swan about this, Swan's men manage to frame Winslow for a crime he didn't commit. Winslow then goes to prison, but does manage to escape. He then bum rushes his way into Death Records, trying to destroy all copies of his music. Unfortunately, he stumbles into the record press and manages to horribly disfigure himself. It is widely believed that he perished soon after that, but in actuality, he snuck his way into the Paradise Theater and also into the wardrobe department, and then became the Phantom of the Paradise. So, with Swan putting on a full production of Winslow's music, will the Phantom end up stopping it from happening, and will anyone involved end up regretting it? So the original title for this film was going to be The Phantom, but due to the comic strip existing of that same name, they decided to change it. This movie had three big inspirations: Phantom of the Opera, Faust, and The Picture of Dorian Gray. The director and co-writer for the movie was Brian De Palma. The character of Winslow Leach was played by William Finley, but they almost offered it to Paul Williams. Williams, of course, would instead go on to play the character of Swan. And also, if you didn't know, Williams also wrote all of the music for this film. In the original script, Swan was actually called Spectre, as the character was loosely based on Phil Spector. Garrett Graham, who would go on to play a different role, and John Voight were both actors that were up for the role of Swan. Jessica Harper plays the character Phoenix, though they did originally offer it to Linda Ronstadt, who turned it down. Garrett Graham, who could have been Swan, would actually play the character of Beef. Peter Boyle was apparently another actor that was also up for that role. Other than the shower scene, Beef's singing voice is not Garrett Graham, but actually Ray Kennedy. The three actors that played the multiple bands throughout the movie were members of an improv comedy troupe called The Committee. At one point, De Palma did think of using an actual band. He thought about using Sha Na Na, but apparently they were too difficult to work with, and then he also considered the Rolling Stones and The Who, but they would have been too expensive. You may not have known this, but Rod Serling, the famous host of The Twilight Zone, cameoed as the introductory voiceover at the beginning of this movie. Sissy Spacek was actually a set dresser for this film, and this is how she met Brian De Palma. De Palma would of course put her in as the main character of his film, Carrie. The original name of the record company was not Death Records, but Swan Song. They ended up having to change this last minute as Led Zeppelin was threatening a lawsuit. The record press used in the movie that disfigures Winslow was an actual record press. They assured William Finley, though, that they could do the scene safely. The audio voice that Swan creates for Winslow was actually the voice of Paul Williams. Swan saying the line of "perfect" after he finds the voice is an inside joke. The single edit of The Time Bomb in the Trunk is an homage to the opening scene of Orson Welles' Touch of Evil from 1958. The interior shots of the Paradise Theater were actually the Majestic Theater in Dallas, Texas. And then the exterior shots were of the City Center Concert Hall in New York City. This movie was primarily filmed in California, but as I mentioned, there were some sequences in Texas and New York. For some reason, there was a lot of bird themes throughout the film. For instance, the names of Swan and Phoenix, the Phantom's mask, the Death Records logo, and multiple other instances of costuming being bird-like. The band Daft Punk has stated that this movie has inspired a lot about them artistically. So when it comes to the film Phantom of the Paradise, I really did like this one. Now, if you're a fan of horror musicals, I think you will enjoy it. If you don't like musicals at all, probably stay away from it. I felt for the most part the story was pretty interesting, and I did really enjoy the characters and just some of the visuals. So I'm going to give this movie a 3 out of 5. And if you did enjoy it, other movies I recommend checking out are The Phantom of the Opera, Repo the Genetic Opera, The Rocky Horror Picture Show, and Shock Treatment. And now it's time to answer the trivia question from the beginning of this episode. Along with Winslow, who does Death Records also have files on? So, as the secretary at Death Records is looking up the name Winslow Leach, we see other names including Alice Cooper, Harold Leventhal, Gary Stromberg, Jerry Brandt, David Geffen, George McGovern, Bette Midler, Jerry Moss, Peter Fonda, and the two at the bottom that you can't really see in this picture are Dick Clark and Chris Christopherson. So if you remembered all of those names, great job. But if you remembered only one of them, you're still a winner. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews. And if there's a movie you'd like to see get a review, just mention it in the comments.